Welcome to Python for Bioinformatics, your first program in variables. So this is going to take you 26 minutes, and afterwards you're going to be really comfortable writing your first program, and you're going to understand what a variable is. Let's get started. Alright, so now that you've got Python all installed, let's get started with our first program, and we're going to move on from there. So if you don't already have a text editor, and you don't know what you're going to use to actually edit your programs, you can use the built-in software called idle. So if you type in idle, it should pop up. What you get first is this funny looking shell, and you go to File, New Window. That opens up a new window, and you can code your Python here. I'm not going to use that because I have another one I prefer. I use Coda currently as my preferred method. And just actually real quick, right back to idle, let me just explain. Because I'm guessing if you're just starting out, you're probably going to be using idle, which is totally fine. It's just hard for me to screencast it, and there's other reasons why I don't use it. And we can get into that, but that's not a talk for now. When you're ready to, for instance, run, so if I put in print hello world with quotes around it and parentheses, I know you can't see that very well, you go to run, and there it'll ask you to save, and go ahead and save this as first program.py, and press this little arrow and save it somewhere that you want to work. So into your folder that you're working in. You might want to make a new one, call it programming, Python, whatever you want. I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to be using idle, but that would be the way you would do it. Let me just actually save it real quick. I'm going to save it to the desktop, so I'll call this python.py, and py is the extension for Python, and you probably can't see it very well, but it says hello world right there. So great, so now that's one method. Another way to do it, if you have a favorite text editor, like I like Coda. I first got introduced to Coda because it's really good for web design. Then I found out that you can use it for a lot of other programming languages. What you can do is navigate to your folder and right-click and do New File. You can do first program.py, and then that should just open up a new program. And conversely, the final method, and I know John is more a fan of this one, and some other people are. And overall, it's probably the most powerful way. If you open up Terminal, if you go over to Spotlight and you type in Terminal, I just put it in my dock because I use it so much. Basically, to put it in your dock, you have to go find the icon, drag and drop it in your dock. It's in Utilities. In Terminal, what you can do is, first off, you want a CD to your directory. I can just drag and drop. And then you can use Emacs. You just type in Emacs. Let me make that bigger. So actually, let me start over because that wasn't big. And let me get a new terminal shell so you don't have to see that. I made one called DNA specifically for the purpose of bioinformatics. Alright. So you can change directory by typing CD. And you can drag and drop the folder that you're working in. And then what I'll do here is you can do Emacs. You can type in the name. So let's say I wanted to call it prog1.py. Doesn't exist, but it makes it. And then what I can do here is print and type hello world, and Command X, Command C to exit. It asks me if I want to save. I type Y, it's saved, and then if I actually go over and look at that prog1.py, it saved and it worked. So if you prefer Emacs, that's great. If you prefer idle right now, that's totally fine. Whatever you like, I just wanted you to show that there's 3 different easy ways to get started. Coda costs money. Coda costs about $100. It's a great investment in my mind, especially if you're going to do any web development. Idle is free, and Emacs is free. So Emacs is definitely high end. I highly recommend using it. There's a bit of a learning curve because you can't scroll and you have to use key commands. But in the long term, it pays off dividends. So enough talk, enough intro. Let's get started with our program. So I am going to use this first program.py. And as you saw before, we have this interesting way to print in Python 3 where we have to use this sort of syntax. Print with 2 parentheses. These are parentheses. And then we put whatever we want inside of it. Now, if you just use print alone, it prints what's called a new line character. So let's go ahead and let's type this. Print hello world, print with nothing in it, and then print hello world again. Now, if you're running idle, as we said before, the way that you do this is pretty simple. In idle, if you click on idle, you just do run, and then you'll get the output, which we can't see in this. Since we're doing it this way, and we've got our terminal already set up and we're in the directory that we're working in, we're going to type Python 3, because remember we installed the different version of Python in addition to 2.7. And we're going to type in the name, first program. Notice how I capitalized it. It has to be exact. And we include the .py. And when we hit enter, we get our output. And it's hello world, an empty new line. That's what this is doing right here. And hello world again. Great. So now we're starting to cook with gas, if you will. And let's keep going with this. Alright, so there's this term, you've probably heard it before in math, it's called a variable. Now, a variable in math is very similar to what a variable in programming is, with some differences. It's not like, well, for instance, x equals 3, right? So if we set a variable, x equals 3, and then we print x, the answer that we expect to see should be 3. Let's go ahead. You can just hit the up key for your history, and it should be the last command you entered. Hit enter. Look, there we go. Hello world again, 3. Perfect. So now we have a variable. This is the first level of abstraction you'll see. This is called an integer value. And it's an integer because it's a whole number. So now let's see what it's like if we make a new variable, call this y, and this one is actually going to be a string. So you may not know this, but this is what a string is. A string is a bunch of characters. It's basically letters. Usually when you say a string, it's more than one letter, but it could be a bunch of empty spaces, and that's still considered a string. So let's say we had string of Homo sapiens, Latin name, and let's say we wanted to print that, do print y. Now we should get Homo sapiens. See if that works. Alright, so we have hello world again, 3 Homo sapiens. Let's say we didn't want to print it 3 then Homo sapiens, we wanted to print 3 Homo sapiens. Just, you know, what if we did? Well, there's a few different ways we can do that. We could do this, print x plus y. Let's go ahead and try that. Oh, this is our first error. Good. So, type error, unsupported operand types for int and string. So, what I was trying to do there is I was trying to put a number and some letters together. And that doesn't work. So, what we can do, there's a few different things we can do, but I think you guys are ready for this. Let's introduce a simple method for strings. So you see what I'm doing here? I push the x and the y variables to the right, and I have some quotes here. In this quote is where I'm going to write. So I'll say, let's say I want to say 3 Homo sapiens. Well, you would say something like x and y, right? But we're going to replace that. So for the x, we're going to replace that with %, and then d, that's for digit. % means, hey, Python, use a variable. And then we'll put another %, and instead of using y, we'll use s for string. Now I know this may be kind of complicated to you right now. That's okay, you don't need to understand it all. But if you get the gist of it, it's going to be helpful. Now, you see what I did here? I put another % after where we have the quotes. And then since we have more than one variable, what we do here is we put 2 parentheses, x, comma, y. Let's go ahead and print that. Alright, so we got 3 Homo sapiens. Hello world again, 3 Homo sapiens. Now, let's clean this up a little. We're writing our program. Yeah, it was great to write hello world, add that space, but we don't really want that anymore. In Python, you can put in a comment by doing the pound sign. Everything after a pound sign does not get printed on that line. So let's put a pound sign in front of this. Let's put a pound sign in front of this. And let's go ahead and see what happens. Let's go ahead and print that. Alright, cool. So we still have this new line. I left that in there. We've got this 3 Homo sapiens, but nothing else printed because the computer goes across and says, oh, this is a comment. I'm not going to print it. And then prints this, and then this is a comment, etc., etc., etc. Alright, so now we need to understand comments. Understanding comments. So what if I have something like this? Print, and then I have print and I put a comment. Still on the same line. What's going to happen there? Well, let's find out. Alright, so this is printed, and then this was not printed. Even though it's on the same line, and there's not a pound sign over here, this is not printed. So only things after the pound sign are printed. Alright, now one thing I didn't mention before is you notice how everything's on the left side. I'm not tabbing at all. I'm not doing this. Print. I'm not moving over by a space and writing stuff. That's really important in Python. You'll learn very soon that Python uses white space and you'll get an error. So let's see if we do this. We do that, and you see how there's some space here, and we try to print this. We're going to get what's called an indentation error, unexpected indent. And that's because Python actually uses white space in its control flow. So we do this. Alright, so now what's going to happen here? So let's say I put this print sign that we used before, we got x equals 3, but then x equals 50 down here. Now when we print, what's going to be the answer? Is it going to print 3? Is it going to print 50? Is it going to print 53? What is it going to do? So let's go ahead and run it. And we get 50 Homo sapiens right here. So that shows that if you name a variable up top and you name it again and you give it a different value, it takes the most recent value. So from here to here, it's 3. X is 3. After this point, and all the way down to the program, as long as you don't change it, it's going to be 50. Now, speaking of changing it, let's try adding another variable. So let's add z. Let's say z is 1. And what we can do here is we can do x plus z. And why don't we try printing that? Print x plus z. Since these are both integers, we don't need to do this fancy string formatting stuff. Let's just try this. Alright, so what do we get? We got 51. 50 plus 1. 51. Not bad. Now you're going to learn, so plus, we've all learned that. I'm sure you know what's going to happen when we do this. This star, when you hit Shift 8, that's the multiplication sign in programming. Well, we can't use x because x is a letter. So they devised that we'll use star. It sort of looks like the, multiplication sign. So, alright, that should be multiplication. I'm going to change this value to 10 just so that we can see something's happening. Let's go ahead and print. And I want to show you division. And let's see what these 4 print out. Alright, so for ease of viewing, I'm going to take out this one right here, this one right here, and now it should just be printing 50 Homo sapiens and then the 4 things we just added. So let's see that. Alright. So we got 50 Homo sapiens. That's this line right here. Then we've got 60. 50 plus 10. Great. Then we got 40. 50 minus 10. Great. Then we got 500. 50 times 10. Great. And then we got 5. 50 divided by 10. Alright, so it looks like it worked out. That's some basic understanding of programming, and now really you can use this as a calculator. If you ever need to do some complex equation, like let's say you needed to do print 50 plus 1,000 divided by 40,000. Now notice how I almost put a comma in there. You don't put commas. Alright? And to make this reproducible, I'm going to do this. So we got 50 plus 1,000 divided by 100. What do you think the answer is going to be? Do you think it's going to be 1,050? 105. What do you think it's going to be? So let's just go ahead and run it. Alright, so the answer we got was 60. Alright, well that's odd. What's going on there? Well, basically, Python sees 50 plus 1,000 divided by 100, and it thinks, okay, 1,000 divided by 100, that equals 10, so 50 plus 10. Remember, order of operations. So if we really wanted to do this how it's written, how we probably are thinking of it, we need to put another set of parentheses. So Python knows to add these two before you divide this. Simple enough. Give that a run. Oh, okay. So there's 10.5. Alright, now we've got what we need. This is useful if you're calculating. Let's go over one last type. We talked about variables. Variables can have many names. For instance, I've been using X, Y, and Z. There's some names you can't use. For instance, that is a reserved word, str. There's other words that are reserved, def, or, and. Don't worry about all of these. If you're using idle, it should show up as a different color. You saw how in this, when I'm just typing Z or X, it's just black. But when I type in and, it turns purple. Or is purple, string is blue. Different things like that tell you. If we're doing Emacs, and we use something like or, you see how it immediately turns purple, and turns purple. Those sorts of things tell us we can't do and equals 0 or and equals 20. We can't do that because and means something else to Python. We're gonna learn about that. So if you're trying to write a variable and you're trying to write a variable, what if I call it str and it turns a different color? That should be the sign to you that something's up and that you can't use that. And if you try to set string to 0, you'll either get more problems or you'll get an error. Alright. Okay. Oh, gotta read it. No. Exit anyways. Yes. Alright. Good. Alright. So, variable, let's set that to 10.0. Alright, what's the difference? I just put a 0.0. I mean, isn't this technically 10.0? Well, technically it's not. In programming, we use different terms for this and this. This is an integer. This is what's called a float, or a floating point. See the point? Floating point. If you want to get something like decimal values, so let's say numerator equals 3.0, denominator equals 12.0. If we print something like numerator divided by denominator, and we have this, we're going to get decimal values. Now, oops, what am I doing? Gotta pay attention. Alright. In this, we get 0.25. Now, that is actually the precise value. Let's say we actually wanted to print this in a more fancy way. So we say we could write the numerators. So we'll do %f for float, put a divide sign, %f. And these are in the string, so this won't divide here. And then what we'll do is we'll do %f for the final value. I think this is the last thing we're going to do here. I don't want to overload you guys. So this should print the numerator of 3, and then show a little division sign, and then 12. And then it should equal 0.25. So let's go ahead and run that. Oh, looks like I didn't put in enough arguments. So what we want here for the first one is numerator. Then we'll put denominator, and then numerator divided by denominator. You see how this is written? Numerator, comma, denominator, comma, numerator divided by denominator. I wrote those in the same area. This is going to go here, this is going to go here, and this is going to go here. Everywhere we see a percent, that's where each one of these are going. Let's go ahead and run this. Oh, I gotta save. Let's run that. Alright. So now it prints it a little bit uglier, I guess. You got a lot of zeros. The numerator, 3 divided by 12 equals 0.25. 0, 0, 0. 0, 0, 0, 0. Alright, so now you should have a basic understanding of variables, and this is going to be really helpful, and we can start moving from here into more complex stuff. Great job, and be sure to watch the next video and leave some comments down below.